This is the weekly Labour report from the Democratic Alliance, Saturday the 11th of July 2020. We look today and expose future problems with employment equity, mass retrenchments, and the benefits and drawcards from working from home. I am Michael Bagram, the Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. It has been a week of turmoil as the Labour Minister threatens to regulate and ultimately legislate to outlaw foreign workers in South Africa. This move was spurred on by the truckers' strike, as everyone's seen, that happened during this past week in South Africa. This strike turned heavily xenophobic, unfortunately. The problem with blanket legislation is that when there is a need for a specific skill in South Africa, and that need often arises in our workplace, it takes months, sometimes even years, to get the new work permit. And with the advent of this new thinking, it might retard these work permits forever. I am daily helping businesses who have promised to train and employ many local South Africans for every single foreigner they bring in with a specific skill. These foreigners would in turn impart their skills to the South Africans who could eventually take over those skilled jobs. Without the use of skill training, we're never going to get enough skills in this country. Those people are desperately needed. And with this blanket legislation, we could have real problems. Obviously, the department could make this part of the permit. They could put a permit in saying that you can bring in someone for a year, 2 years, even 3 years, on the basis that you'll employ 1, 2, 3, up to 10 locals. And also, that foreigner would then in turn train the locals to take over the job. This is what should be expected, but somehow that thinking isn't there. Somehow the Department of Employment and Labour and Home Affairs have got a real problem with it, and I don't understand it. Employment equity is a real handbrake to job creation. And in fact worse, employment equity could actually lead to job losses, and it has done in the past. There's even talk to try and introduce stricter measures where employers could use employment equity in the retrenchment exercise. I mean, just think of this carefully. In other words, instead of using last in, first out, or instead of using skills that are needed in the business, you might have to in the future look at possibly retrenching people to make way for the employment equity figures, for hitting your target, for instance. I know this has been mooted by the Department of Employment and Labour. We have to do everything in our power to ensure that that doesn't happen. We can't have that happening in South Africa or in any other country for that matter. Retrenchment, dismissal for operational requirements must be done on a no-fault basis. And you can't have someone introducing measures such as employment equity to enhance your retrenchments. It doesn't make sense at all. As we know, mass retrenchments are now happening. I'm hearing about it every 15, 20 minutes. I'm getting calls, emails, discussions with companies who are involving themselves in mass retrenchment. This wasn't caused by COVID-19. It's been caused by the lockdown. And we call on the President, everyone who's in this so-called council, to actually free up the workforce as quickly as possible. The retrenchments is going to kill South Africa. We can't afford it. Treasury have told us anything from 3 to 7 million. Well, it looks like that is coming to pass. People are being retrenched in their dozens. There's not one family that hasn't been affected by retrenchment or possible retrenchment in the near future. We need to consider alternatives to retrenchment. Employers must start looking at retraining, reskilling. The Department of Employment and Labour does have a scheme that they are possibly able to help people retrain, reskill. It's called the Employment Layoff Scheme. I know the trade unions don't seem to want to use it, but it can be a good scheme and it's probably worth having, probably worth pursuing. Now, there is still an ability, even though the TERS, the emergency funding, has come to an end. In other words, you can't claim for the month of July. But what you can do is, if the staff are working part-time and earning less, you can still complete the UI-19 form from the employment figures, and when you fill in that form, you explain that people are working 20% less of their time and they're getting 20% less salary. If that's the case, the UIF has to pay, and you need to complete that and start claiming from the UIF. It has been added to the UI-19 form. The Democratic Alliance is doing everything in its power to try and stem the tide of the mass retrenchment. We're calling for the employers to retrain, reskill, even claim for short time. But don't retrench if you can avoid it. The employment figures need to be boosted in some way or other. There's a new norm, working from home. And it's a good thing, it's not bad at all. Those that can work from home should be working from home. Employers should be encouraging it. There's a whole lot of benefits. I mean, just think of all the mass benefits that you would have. No travel, less office space needed, greater productivity, and even the need for less human resource management. The reality is, working from home is going to be with us a long time, never mind COVID-19. People are starting to consider this as an option. And there are some other benefits that would be added to it. Obviously, there's going to mean less traffic. There's going to be many, many more Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams or whatever you choose. This becomes a lot cheaper for the companies to do, for everyone, for your customers and for the company. Meeting costs will be incredibly low because you can do it all virtually, and people are getting used to it now, and let's make use of it. Obviously, one of the benefits to the employees is they could claim income tax benefits from working from home. It would be cutting costs for both the employers and the employees. Employees would have to keep invoices, statements, they'd have to look at everything. They can claim for equipment at home. They can even claim for repairs to the equipment and the office. If that office is regularly used for your work and is exclusively used for your work, well, then you can claim income tax benefits for it. And that's a big benefit to anyone. And it would help the employees in South Africa today. So in the long run, that can be cheaper for the employee and for the employer. Labour legislation will have to take into account these changing circumstances, including the need to relook at health and safety at the workplace. If your workplace is at home, how do you actually implement the health and safety regulations in your home? We're going to have to relook at it. We'll have to ask the Minister of Employment and Labour to reconsider the legislation and see what is the best way forward with people working from homes. These could be exciting times ahead. This is Michael Bagram, Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. Saturday, the 11th of July 2020. Thank you once again for listening to us.